Yeah, we're live. Throwing a shout out to West Tech Performance. Oh, we gotta do a little coverage over here, huh? Let's go a little bit to that side. Come on, cooperate. Come on, there we go. Yeah, now we're talking green screen. Unless there's nothing up behind there, though. There should be, definitely. So tonight we're going to talk about some cool stuff. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I think my mic's working. We're going to talk about the video that I just put up, which is part 2 of the header saga, where we compare the 1 3/4 headers versus the 1 7/8 headers. And after I did the test on the weird kind of 5.7, the 5.3 bored out with weird mast RHS heads, and then a truck manifold, and then a truck cam, and so people were like, yeah, nobody would even use that. Um, but it demonstrated with 2 different kinds of cams what happens when we run an 1 3/4 header versus an 1 7/8 header, and then when we change the collector link extensions and all that and trying to pick up low speed power, we showed what all of them do. And everyone naturally was, well, that's the wrong application, that's the wrong motor. So instead of wrong cam, it's now wrong test motor. So I'm like, okay, well, I have lots of other test data. As a matter of fact, I even have way more than the test that I put up today. I also have some stuff on a couple of, like, a supercharged LS3 and a supercharged 427. I got lots of header data. A lot of it is stock exhaust manifolds versus long tubes, and we see some pretty good power gains when we do that. The long tubes on almost any combination are worth power. Whether or not it's worth that for you to put them on and go through changing the exhaust and all that stuff, that's all up to you guys. But it's definitely worth power, and worth more power, obviously, as we go up with power output of the motor that we're testing it on, as we go up in camshaft and all of that stuff. But because I ran the test before and we ran on some fairly mild combinations, honestly, if I was looking at a mild combination for a truck, long tube headers would be one of the go-to things. I'm looking for low speed power. Long tube headers would definitely be one of the go-to things that I would consider. I have a 5.3, but if I had a 6-liter, I would also think about changing the heads. I would think about changing the cam. The truck intake manifold or Trailblazer SS, I probably would keep, but definitely long tubes, like a 706 head, a small camshaft. And then you could get really good low speed power, as we saw, because you're also going to have a full exhaust, and so all of that stuff will come into play. So it should work out pretty good. But because we ran that on those mild combinations, I decided to step the game up a little bit and show people what happens. And everybody's comment was, okay, well, at what power level, if it's not 450 or 460 or 470 horsepower, wherever we were, 470, I think, and 480 horsepower on that combination. If it's not there, then where is it? Where is essentially the crossover point? Everybody wants absolutes. How much boost can I run with no ring gap? And then how much power do I need to be making before 1 7/8 makes a lot of power, makes a good gain? I don't think it exactly works like that. At least it hasn't shown that on my testing, other than going from stock exhaust manifold to headers. There's definitely a gain there. But as we showed in this test with a near 600 horsepower naturally aspirated 383 stroker, still running it out to 65 or 6,600. And then with the supercharged version, we ran another 383, different camshaft, different heads, and then we had a Whipple supercharger on there. Not making a lot of boost. I think with the right pulley on there, we were a little less than 10, 9.6, and then down to 9.2 after we put the headers on, and that's interesting. That's always a good tell. That if you've made the right kind of upgrade on a supercharged combination, if the boost comes down, with the possible exception of cam timing. And by that, I mean varying the cam timing on variable cam timing motors. Sometimes you can make the boost come down and the power doesn't go up. What you want are both of those things. And that's what we saw with the header. When we put the 1 7/8 headers on and change the change the ignition timing by 1 degree. I love that everybody was yelling about that. When we changed that, we definitely picked up power, and we picked up power up at the top, and we also changed the boost. So I kind of know that the header was effective, because when we lower the boost and the power goes up, that's usually a pretty good sign. We don't see that with timing, and that's kind of how I know what's going on there. When we change the timing, we don't normally see a big change in boost pressure. But when we do something else, like ported cylinder heads are definitely camshaft, sometimes intake manifold. Headers obviously come into there as well. When we improve the power output of the naturally aspirated motor, usually we see a drop in boost especially if the thing that we're testing it on has a fixed like impeller or rotor speed. So on a turbo, it will be sometimes it's self-compensating. So if you tell it, I want to make 10 pounds of boost, and you do something to the motor that would otherwise lower the boost because you made it more efficient, the turbo goes, oh, well, you still want 10 pounds of boost. So I'm just going to spin the impeller up faster on the turbo, and we're going to try to maintain 10 pounds of boost, which means you're going to gain even more. On a centrifugal or a roots blower or a twin screw, when you improve the power like we did with the header, what happens is the boost will come down because the blower is still spinning the same speed. It just has now less resistance, and it flows more air because it's able to process more, because the motor is more efficient, and then the pressure or the resistance to that is going to go down. So that's usually how it works. And when I saw that on this test, it told me that the headers were kind of doing something. And we've seen that in the Kenny Bell 427 and the Kenny Bell LS3 stuff too. We see the change in boost when we do headers on them, which kind of tells me, and we were talking about this last night, do headers work on short runner supercharged, positive displacement supercharged specifically applications where they might not be as receptive to the what I call reverse reflected waves, but the scavenging effect of the exhaust side, because the intake has such short runners and they're not synced with the long tube reflected waves in the long tube headers. So I was wondering if they were less responsive to that, but it does seem to show that they are at least somewhat responsive to it. I'd still like to do the test where I compared a long runner and short runner inlet manifold with boost, and to see if one of those likes the header better than the other. And I wouldn't have to do it with a positive displacement. We could actually run it with a centrifugal, let's say, and then just run a long runner and a short runner manifold and just see which one of the, and then while we were doing that, also do the header comparison to see which one is more receptive to the header on that combination. But let me know what you guys think. Did you guys think and also I just got out from the garage, I found some bad news. I have the Dodge Magnum out there, the 360 Magnum, and I was working with my son. We were taking it apart, so we took the intake off and the distributor and the rockers and all that stuff, and got down to the short block. Essentially, I couldn't take the damper off because I found out that I don't have a socket that's big enough for that Dodge, so I need to go get one of those from Harbor Freight or somewhere tomorrow. And that way I can take that off, because I've got to take the pistons out and swap the pistons back over. So we're getting close to being able to do that. But when I took the heads off, obviously this thing, maybe when I was driving and we got rain, or when it was outside and sitting in the truck, it got rain. At some point it got water in it. And so one of the cylinders now has a big rust deposit in it. I still have my finger. I mean, it is a wrecking yard motor, so I'm not that concerned about it. And so I have my fingers crossed that we can, I can soak it with Blast Away or WD-40 or something, and then use a emery cloth or sandpaper or steel wool or something, and get the rust stain out of it, at least enough so that the piston will go up and down and not have a big problem. I mean, none of the cylinders look great anyway. The thing needs to be rebuilt. I mean, it still seems like it ran pretty good. A couple of the lifters were a little sticky coming out, but again, it's a high mileage motor, and I kind of would expect that. But we'll soak them in some good oil and try to hopefully clean them out a little bit if as best we can. Hopefully that rust will come out. I think it will. I've already sprayed it with WD-40, and I'm worked it with a screwdriver and stuff just to get it started, just get the big chunks off, and then we'll sand them down. I just need to get the pistons out. What I want to do is, when I get the pistons out, I also want to check the bearings and see how they are. I kind of noticed when we were doing the piston flip video with the guys from Engine Masters, we didn't change anything, but it looked like some of them might have been down to, the copper. So I might want to put fresh ones in there, just as a precaution. I'm going to definitely change the camshaft. The other thing I want to measure is the valve springs. I don't think I brought my valve spring compressor home. I have that down south. But I want to, the other thing I forgot that I didn't have here is I don't have a puller for the damper, and I'll have to get one of those too, but that's pretty cheap. So I'll have to pull that off so I can get the front cover off and get the cam out, because we're going to run a different camshaft in it, and I want to be able to do a cam swap. And so I'm also going to need valve springs. So I need to measure the springs. I need to measure the OD and then the installed height to get an idea what kind of spring upgrade package I can put on there and make it work. It's just going to be a 500 lift or 510 or something. It's a fairly small flat tappet cam. It's from the guys at UT Awesome, the same guys that sent the kegger mod deal that we did. We have that on there. We pulled that off to get access to everything. But I want to do that test with that mild camshaft. Then we also want to run boost on it, because you would. I noticed that we put the head gaskets back together, that we did put the copper spray on them, because that was the only set of head gaskets that we had. So, but it all sealed up fine. It was great. So let's see what you guys, let's see, Richard, are you doing ring gap on the 5.9? I will, and that's the other reason we're going to take it apart. While it's apart, we didn't want to do it, obviously, in between the ring gap test, because we didn't want to throw another variable in there, because that would have been the end-all thing that during the discussion. As it was, I heard people actually talking about, because like we duplicated the power down to the decimal point. So, but guys were talking about, well, if you round that up, that's 1 horsepower. So that's a difference. I'm like, really? You're reaching that far to try to find something? The reality is that there just wasn't anything in the way that we tested it. And I'm just proud that we got the thing like exactly repeatable. When you start talking about to the decimal point of 1 horsepower and repeatability, that's pretty good. And I was excited and happy that we took the time and effort and made that what it is. But the reality is that's just one test, and that's an engine dyno. And I know that in a lot of guys that talk about dynos and talk about how dumb they are and how terrible the guys that run dyno tests are, and that they don't know anything because they don't go to the track, yada, yada, yada. What they don't realize is that you can actually change the acceleration rate of the dynos. You can make it 50 RPM per second or 50 RPM, and you can make it 1500. You can vary it anywhere in there. And so you could do lots of stuff with that. But that's just one test. And so you could maybe do another test on the chassis dyno where you're doing an inertia test, an acceleration of a fixed drum mass. You could do testing out on the street, although I don't know guys that can really, or even at the track, I don't know guys that can really do that sort of back-to-back testing. Because like, what if we saw a difference of only 5 horsepower? Could a guy go out on the, and I'm talking about a regular guy. I'm not talking about a guy that runs like a super stock car or a stock eliminator car, something like that runs on the number every time. I'm talking about the average guy that goes out and runs. He's not going to be able to tell that kind of difference. He's not going to be able to tell us that something worked or didn't work. So I'd like to see it quantified somehow. And there will be other ways to measure it and try that, but that's another test, I guess, for another day. But anyway, we're taking it apart. We're going to put the pistons back in. Maybe I'll put bearings in it if it needs it. We're definitely going to try a different camshaft, and we're definitely going to run boost. So while I have this thing apart and I have the pan off, we'll probably knock a hole in the pan, put a fitting in there so that we have a return for the turbo already, because that's usually a big time-consuming thing when we're on the dyno. So if we have that, then it's just a matter of making the Y pipe. And I already have somebody sent me the big opening stock exhaust manifolds, and we can run those. And then I can make the Y pipe, because it's just a 2-bolt flared, ball and socket kind of flange. Really easy. Just make a Y pipe off of that with wastegate provisions for wastegates, and then away we go. And then we can run boost on the kegger manifold or some kind of other fuel injected manifold. Honestly, if I was trying to make power with a turbo, I wouldn't pick that manifold. I wouldn't even pick a modified version of that manifold. I would like to see a dual plane EFI manifold. I think would be ideal for that combination, because we're not going to run a lot of RPM. And we'll have a fairly mild camshaft in it until we start stepping things up and go to, ported heads or an aftermarket head, and then put some real camshaft in it. I honestly don't know. I haven't done any piston to valve measurements, so I don't know how much camshaft will fit. I'm assuming, like the rest of the things that are out there, that it's going to be in the 230s or something. And then if we could put that much camshaft in it and decent heads on it, it should make actually pretty good NA power. And even if we just make, like we made 300 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds, even if we got the thing up to where it was making closer to 400 horsepower, you had not too much boost, and you're talking about the thing making, pretty good power, certainly more than enough to have certainly fun in a Duster or whatever that you would put it in. It would be kind of cool. And especially a 360, way more than a 318. The 360 is going to make whatever kind of turbo you put on there very responsive, and it's going to have a lot of like low speed power, so much more than a 318. But again, another story for another day. I do want to do a comparison between a 318 and a 360 with the same combination, just to demonstrate to people that, hey, look, the bigger motor makes a lot more average power. With the 318 and the 360, the difference I don't think will be quite as great as it was between the 350 and the 302. More so maybe than between the 327 and the 350. But even with that, we saw a pretty good amount of torque change between the 327 and the 350. Although those two did not, the LT1 and the L76 did not have the same camshaft. The L76 had the Duntov camshaft in it, and the LT1 has an LT1 camshaft in it, which is a bit milder than the 327 and the 302 camshaft. But if we ran the same cams in the 360 and the 318, what will happen is the 318 will make peak power a little bit higher, like we see with a 4.8 and a 5.3 kind of thing. It'll make peak power a little bit higher, not because it likes to rev, which is a lot of guys use that description. It's more because it has to rev, because it has less displacement, and it just makes a lot less average power. So, for driving around, especially guys that are like, if you're on the stall converter or a two-step or whatever, and you're launching it, and then you're only running in a very short RPM range, you can make lots of stuff work. But when you're driving around on the street and you nail the throttle, the bigger motor with more torque it's going to be a lot more fun. It'll be a lot better. So let's see what you guys have. Let's see what you guys have going on. My old Porsche ran 1082 at 133. That's a pretty good Porsche. Dry ice in the fuel cells. That's good. They did that way back. The guys from Donahue's team, that was one of their unfair advantages, that they were using really high positioned fuel rigs to get lots of gravity feed, and so it could feel really fast. And they were also super cooling the fuel so that you could put more fuel in, and so that you could go farther on the amount of fuel that you put in, because it would start to expand, and hopefully you would have a couple laps in before it expanded all the way and started spilling out. Richard, do you know if you can swap a TBI for an EFI setup on a Dodge LA motor, Holly Sniper and whatnot? You can put a port EFI setup on an LA motor if that's your question. The factory computer running a TBI will not run a port EFI, not that I know of. I don't think it has that capability, because it's only running 2 injectors, I think, on the TBI. Any word on doing a turbo 429? Mark has a 429 that I can use, and I definitely want to do it. We haven't set it all up. What's the difference in 821 heads and 0821 heads? When they're talking about 821 heads, they're talking about 0821 heads or 823 heads, and they're the 821 and the 823 heads, I think, are the same in terms of flow. I don't know if maybe they have. Does one of them have a like a sodium filled valve or a light valve or something? Can you show in video when you put the fitting in the oil pan for the turbo oil return line? I can. We do it usually fairly easily. Like on any sort of cast pan, I just drill and tap the hole, and then we screw a fitting in, a pipe fitting. On other ones, we use a you know, the unibits, and we'll on a steel pan like a stamped pan, we'll drill a hole in it, and then CX Racing and other people sell what is essentially a bulkhead fitting. It's like a barb fitting, but it has a nut on it, and then it has two like Celasto O-rings on it, so one on either side. So you put that through the hole, and the O-ring steel, and then you put the nut on the inside. The nut's pretty big, so you got to make sure nothing hits it. But then you just tighten all that down, and that actually seals pretty well. There are other ways to do it. Sometimes we have in the past just taking a piece of standoff tube, drill a hole, put it in there, and then just weld it, and that also works too. Uh-oh. Got my phone ringing. Got to turn that off. Let's see. Used to work with a colleague of Mark Donahue who let me borrow read his signed original copy of The Unfair Advantage. That's awesome. I raced against his son when I was doing Bridgestone Supercar. He drove for a BMW team. He was a really nice guy. Yeah, Dan, if you look at the pricing on what those guys spend on, and that's the problem with class racing. That's why when I started road racing, I went into showroom stocks. I thought, well, they're all stock cars, right? And then you find out some of them are not quite as stock as others. They look an awful lot like that. But then the problem is that the amount of money that you have to spend to make your stock parts stock-ish is really expensive. And that's the problem with that kind of racing, is it the level of gray area rules bending, let's call it, is really expensive. Ooh, Eric, I like this. I'm putting a Honda CV750 Nighthawk engine in a 2002 Arctic Cat Z440 Snow Pro frame. Nice. And now I'm thinking about turbocharging. You definitely should. Honda had factory turbo bike, so you definitely have to do that. Have you ever worked on Subarus? I have not. I drove one in road racing, but I never worked on the engines or anything. How is the Big Bang inline 6 going? I have a couple of them. Well, no, we're not going to do a Big Bang on the 292, just on the 4200. RNS machine and welding, 489 big block Chevy. What size Pro Charger is best? NA is about 600 wheel horsepower. So I would put an F1A 94, because that would get you to 1200 or 1300 flywheel if you want to get that far. So you could easily do 1000 wheel horsepower with that. The 821s do have the lightweight valve. So is an 821 the LS3 head then? Running 10s with a 455 Oldsmobile. There you go. Shots fired. Before, Matt, you either had to be around the strip a lot and know what you're doing for 10s, even with some money. Edward, header tube diameter. I know you did this last night. 1 3/4 versus 1 1/4. That's gotta be right. For small block forward for a turbo manifold. I would do 1 5/8, and I wouldn't really worry about the primary diameter for a header manifold. What do you know about cryo treating internals or any experience? I have none on that. Regarding your recent tests of turbos versus blowers, were the results vary greatly if you spun a larger blower but at a slower speed? Actually, if you spun a larger blower at a slower speed, what tends to happen is it's much less responsive down low than running the smaller blower faster. but it does make more power on the top if you're limited in flow because of your choice of smaller blower. It's still not going to do what a turbo does. Any advantages to make an 871 blower manifold out of a tunnel ram on a Ford 460? Yes, you will make a lot more power with a tunnel ram than you will with a short runner typical 871 blower manifold. Freiberger did that test and showed that. They asked me what was going to happen when they did that because him and Brule were both asking me on the blower stuff. And I told him, I said, look, if the tunnel ram is going to make a bunch more power NA, which it does, because if you have a runner like this short and then you have one that's this long, the longer one's going to make more average power, especially in the RPM range that they were running it at. And then when you add boost to that, it just continues that. So the tunnel ram makes more power NA and it will make more power under boost. Now the thing is, can you package that? Because it's really, really tall. I walk by that thing every time I'm at West Tech. I know you're not a fan of single pattern cams, big block Chevy 454, 781 heads, air gap, currently a 560 lift, single pattern comp cam. So is it like a Magnum grind or something on the comp cam? Any better recommendations? More torque than horsepower, 511 torque, 480 horsepower. So it's a small comp cam. It's a 454, 480 horsepower. So you're like, what is that thing, 230 or something at 50? An 821 off of the L76 probably isn't the sodium-filled hollow valves. Is the L92? I don't think the L92 head or the LY6 are either. I can't. They might have been 821s. I can't remember. How do the 821, 823 compare to other rec port heads? They're all the factory rec port heads are the same, as far as I know. How do you build a GT5 car? that's money, right? Now that we have the ability to build custom billet heads, speaking of low budget, now that we have the ability to build custom billet heads and blocks, does it mean we could double the size of a 2J and have it be beneficial in a racing situation like those super large cubic inch V8s? Yeah, you could, but if you were going to build a billet version of a 2J, the first thing you'd want to do is have a much better cylinder head. I know lots of people make power with turbo versions of that 2J, but the 2J head is really not that great. So you could do a lot better and you could get a lot more flow if you're building a custom engine. Have you ever tested different firing orders? We've done the firing order swaps, like on the big blocks and small blocks, and it didn't seem to do anything. Just changing the firing order doesn't seem to change the power. They're doing it for a second or third order vibration changes, I think is why they said that the factory was doing that. Any recommendations for my L67? Lots of 3800 videos of it. It's built up and we're adding a TVS 1900 with 103 millimeter throttle body, then return. That blower will make a lot of power. It's not going to make what a turbo does, but it'll still make a lot more than the M90 does. I do cryo treating on rotary housings after recoating. Not worth the cost unless you're dealing with a specialized application. Yes, the 292 with the Dominator carburetor, because everybody needs that. If you're going to go up from a 1-barrel to a 2-barrel and then to a 2-barrel to a 4-barrel, you might as well go all the way. I guess we could have put dual Dominators on it, right? What's the biggest cubic inch LS before things start getting too custom? On a tall deck block, on a tall deck RHS block, which is what I had, you can go over 500 cubic inches. Who put the Dominator on a stove bolt 6-cylinder? There's only one guy I know of. I made a 495 LS, and it's certainly possible to go more than that because we could have put a bigger stroke in it, and we had more bore that we could have gone to. I did 4185, and I think that thing will go to 4200. Have you ever tried turbocharging a two-stroke? I have not. Would like to turbocharge my Ski-Doo 9700 Blizzard. I've not tried that. Richard's 3 pages. Am I behind everybody? Do I need to catch up? Okay, I'll zoom back down. I can control that. Are engine 7/8 headers too big to spool a VS 7875 with a stock bottom M302? You don't need engine 7/8 headers for that, for a 302. Do you think it's worth it to have TEA port 6.4 liter Hemi heads while they're off? I don't think you need to do that. And you have a 225 cam, the stock 6.4 liter heads are more than good enough for that. You shall pass air. Nice. It is smart to brace your turbo. Yeah, you don't need engine 7/8 headers on a 302 with a turbo on it. Just look what we do with the stock exhaust manifolds on an LS. Even the stock exhaust manifolds on a 5 liter we've run turbos with. What's the power boost limit of the aluminum LS blocks before sleeves are a good idea? The 5.3 liter aluminum blocks are good to whatever power you want to go with them. I mean, I guess if a guy's going to 2000 or 2500, you'd want to get an aftermarket block, but those will do what a production iron block will do. The LS1 and LS2 and LS3 stuff, we normally don't go over 1000. Ever try running a two-stroke on diesel? I have not. I have seen a two-stroke diesel that was both turbocharged and supercharged. I want to see a Ford 6.2 built up very thoroughly on YouTube. Do they even have heads for those, or camshafts, or intake manifolds, or anything for a 6-speed Ford? I would like to add nitrous 150 plate, but I know you said you're a fan of the single pattern cam. I figured I'd see if you have a better camera. Any sort of dual pattern cam. Look at all the extreme energy stuff. I don't know what will fit. Lucky for you, the same intake profile will probably fit whatever you have now, and then just add exhaust duration. If you take a look at, I just did a test. I don't know, last year when we were filming it, we did a test of a single pattern versus a dual pattern camshaft with the same intake duration. And the dual pattern camshaft made a lot more power. Chevy 350, I heard I could get more horsepower switching to E85 and carb tune. Not usually on any kind of stock 350. If it's really high compression, then possibly. Or turbo. How bad would lag be on an 1100 horsepower size single turbo? Well, that's like an S480. 5.3 liter. Take a look. I have those videos up. I have an S480 where we run on a 5.3 before. Would it be advantageous to run E85 with meth injection versus 91 with meth injection with air-to-air intercooler? So you just want to run E85 with water meth injection, and you want to compare that to 91 with meth injection and an intercooler? And would that be a test you would run? It wouldn't be a test I would be interested in running. I don't know. Those are very specific things. I don't know why people would be choosing those two things. I would choose E85 with an intercooler over all of that. Daniel, I have put a stroker kit in my LQ4, 4-inch stroke, but I didn't sleeve the block. You don't need to do that. Some said it would put premature wear on the skirts of the pistons. Is this an issue I really need to be concerned about? You got pistons with your stroker kit. that are not stock ones, because the stock ones obviously won't work with that stroker kit. You have pistons that were designed to work with that stroker kit. They're going to have different than stock sleeves, and you'll be fine. What motor was the dual pattern versus single pattern test done on? I'm thinking it was a small block. This is the last time I'll be on for a while. Are you going into the hospital? I hope not. Dude, let us know what's going on, man. Still can't run straight E85 through a standard Holley carb. You need E85 specific carb. We've done it through a standard carburetor. We just up the jets a lot. I don't think it's the way. It's not the way to go for driving around. We did it okay for the dyno, but yes, everybody wish him good luck. On Motor X, no aftermarket cams are available. What effect would there be? Extensive head porting and larger valves on a stock size cam comparable to a larger duration cam. You're going to get fewer. The gains will be much less with ported heads on a stock cammed motor than they would be with something that had a cam. For one thing, you're going to be making a lot more power and taking advantage of the airflow of the heads. And also, you're going to be taking advantage with more lift, hopefully with the camshaft, where the ported head would be flowing also. Your 6-liter that you just picked up in your 2003 Escalade would be a good engine to run boost on. All of the LSs are. What does it cost you to rebuild a 429 for your test? I'm not going to rebuild it. We're just going to run it. I meant both with air-to-air intercooler. The E85 with an air-to-air intercooler will make more power than the water meth and 91 by a pretty significant amount. Charles, the cam would do more good. There is a company that does custom cams in California. It's probably Schneider. They do regrinds of almost anything, so they probably could hook you up. Did you ever find a Trail 70 to turbo? I saw one for $4,000. They are scarce. I was looking for a Trail 90. A van down by the river. And into the river we dived. I was a van owner. I had a Dodge van that had a LA 360 in it. Does a ported TBSS manifold and throttle body, is it worth, and throttle body worth it to port? So I think your question is it worth porting the Trailblazer SS? I don't know. If you're at a point where the intake is restricting you, like you have lots of displacement and lots of head flow and lots of camshaft, and now the intake is holding you back, then yes. If not, then probably not. Best route for power on a factory rebuilt L98 on a C4 Corvette. camshaft and ported heads, but the tune port is always going to be holding you back for power. Best mods to the LSA blower on my ZL1. Very cool. Congratulations for having a cool car, ported or not. If you haven't changed the pulley from a factory pulley, the pulley is the thing that you need to change first. You need to speed the blower up and then port it. But I would also do a cam before I would do that also. The cam would be the first thing. I know, an LSA question. That's good stuff. David, Richard, Dad's got a 385-inch, nice small block Chevy. I like that. I used to have one of those. AFR 195s, good head, 205 intake, Performer air gap, all that's good. Isky 280 mega cam, 232. Yeah, 450 horsepower is realistic for that. And my guess is it's going to make more torque than that. In your opinion, are the Gen 2, I'm thinking you mean Gen 3 Hemi heads as good as the LS Recport stuff? I always hear the rods and pistons and the Hemis are like less. You had boost. Was your question about the heads or about the motors? A Gen 3 Hemi, the early stuff, those heads are not as good as an LS3 head is, not even close. They flow about 260 or 70, I think, and then an LS3 head is 315. The later Hemi stuff is as good as the Recport stuff is. We've made well over 1,000 horsepower with a stock early one. I mean, stock bottom end early one, as long as you put ring gap in it. The problem a lot of Hemi guys had back in the day when they were blowing them up is they had limited to no tuning ability with them, and they would just run the boost anyway. And almost none of the guys I knew would put ring gap in them. They were famous for just cranking the boost up. And if you don't have the ability to tune it and have the timing be lower and have the right amount of fuel that you need and put ring gap in it, you're going to blow it up. And so they got a bad reputation. The top ringland on the Hemi is not as big as it needs to be, but a lot of the problem was that other stuff. Is an increase in 218 to 224 of duration a significant increase in a 6-liter? You saw the difference in the camshaft between a 212 and a 219. So that should give you an indication. I do have a question. I haven't thought of this completely, though. The C4 LT5, okay, the ZR1 motor, which is an oddball, the 4-cam Lotus deal. Can you run an LS9 supercharger on it? You could if you adapted the supercharger, if you made a completely new manifold and put the supercharger on it. Anything is possible. It's not going to be anywhere near any kind of bolt-on. It's going to be lots of machining to make that work. What it needs is our twin turbos. Look at that. Somebody just apologized. What's going on? People shouldn't be doing that in comments. You should fight and know that you're right until the bitter end, right? No, you shouldn't. That's awesome. Grooves the land. Thumbs up to you, man. 230, 242, 115 plus 4, also known as the BTR CCP Jam Cam. I don't know what that is for an LS2 with headers and Vortec SI. Supercharger is the cam that's recommended by the shop that tunes it. What are your thoughts? A 230, 242 cam will work with a blower. It will work just fine. The throttle body is smaller on the LSA than the LS3. That's unfortunate. You need at least a 92 millimeter throttle body and probably a 102. An LQ9, 243 heads, Trailblazer SS manifold, 232, 234 cam, 3600 stall, E85, long tubes. What else can I do to make a NA power? You can put a better camshaft in it. You need like a 232, 248, and then that would make more power at the top. Not a lot, but some. Stock LS rec ports are 315, not 315 cc's. They flow 315 CFM. The late Hemis flow a little more than that, not a lot, but the early ones only flow 270. What's cheaper to build, a 5.3 or a 6.0? The parts should cost the same if you are buying parts to rebuild them. But getting the motor itself, if you have nothing and you have to either buy a 5.3, which is a dime a dozen in any wrecking yard, 6.0s are harder to find and they're more expensive to buy initially. When it comes to ported heads, wouldn't the head with smaller ports with similar airflow make more power? Yeah, in my opinion, it does. And according to Brian Tooley and everybody that I've talked to, coefficient of discharge is a big thing. And then if you can make airflow through the smaller port, you should have better cylinder filling. That's my opinion. A lot of times that's hard to do, though. It's hard to get the same airflow with a smaller port. How are you? For a motorhome 440, what would be a better stroker kit or go through it with a turbo on it? A turbos would make more power ultimately. Is it worth putting a turbo kit or a supercharger on an L98? The L98 is pretty good application for a centrifugal blower because then you have a rising boost curve and then you can extend the effective RPM range of an L98 out pretty good. You can also do that with a turbo. Take a look. I have L98 turbo videos up and you can see what we did on the L98 and you can see that it's basically like a diesel engine. It just makes a million foot-pounds just like it does NA. And then the power is, you know, peak power is not great. It makes more torque than horsepower. Richard, do you ever find a vet crossfire intake to test? I'm telling you, I've got one that's been port matched with a lid for a carb. That would be cool. How come most all LS cams have a relatively wide LSA of 113 when we all know less LSA equals more torque? Usually it's because of idle quality. Guys, if they're driving them on the street, don't want a 106 degree LSA with all of the monkey motion that goes on with that. It usually will make more low speed mid range and sometimes all the way up to whatever RPM you're running. Sometimes it'll make just more power everywhere. But it's one of the things that I play with, but you do trade off idle quality and drivability with that. LM7 Texas Speed Cam Kit ported head, power expectations on my first build. Well, let me know what your power expectations are. Put some boost on 7.3 liter Godzilla. I don't have one of those and probably won't get one because they're really expensive. Do you know if SRP B16 Honda turbo pistons and the turbo rings are gap for boost right out of the box? I would highly doubt it. Rich, another question about the Dodge LA motors. Can you boost them? Yes. I've read forum threads saying the computer cannot handle upgrades because the air fuel is set in stone or silicon, I guess. I don't know about the factory ECU. The motor itself will take boost without any problem. I don't know about tuning factory ECUs because they don't do any of that. And if it's a throttle body injected LA motor, which I think that is, or did they didn't have the beer kegs on the LA when they went to the hydraulic roller stuff. I don't know that enough about them, I guess. If it's a throttle body injected deal, you just don't have enough fuel for it because the fuel flow of the throttle body is going to be limited, just like the TPI stuff on the Chevys. Best turbo size for an LT Gen 5, 5.3 liter. put a 78, 75 on it so that you have some room to grow. If you only ever want to run 7 pounds of boost in a GT45, but I think I would put something bigger on that motor. When you're going to dig up your RB, the RB is already dug up. It's sitting there ready, waiting. Do you think higher ratio rockers increase duration by 2 degrees? It depends on which one you're putting on, but yeah, they change the defective duration. Which video should I watch to learn about choosing a turbo size? You should choose a turbo size based on the power output that you want your motor to have. And then you can ask in here what size that is, and we'll tell you. And then you have to worry about response rate on your particular motor, what the NA power output and all that stuff is. But I ran a variety of different turbos. I have some videos up where I ran a variety of different turbos on a K24. I also ran a variety of different turbos on a 4.8. So you can look at those and kind of see what happens with them. Small block Chevy, 1.5 to 1.6. Everyone says 2 degrees. I think that's probably about right. The RB would fit in the Z very nicely. And it's really the motor that should go in there. The RB25 is all stock right now. I've never even run it. Is it possible to run a Duramax cylinder head on an LS? I don't know. I don't know what the bore spacing is or any of that. 1,500 horsepower single turbo on a 6-liter. So a 1,500 horsepower turbo is going to be like an 85 or an 88 millimeter turbo. You choosing a cam base, I'm sure that's supposed to be on. Cam specs is bad. Choose a cam based off the entire engine build. Okay. Jarvis, I was just asking what kind of power should I expect going through a 4L80E? I don't know what I can't remember what your question was before this. Forge 408 running twins to get 1,500 horsepower. Well, we ran twin S475s, which would be good for 2,000. You could run twin GT45s. The cheap ones would get you almost 1,500. They might actually get you 1,500. Richard, I'd love to learn more about the specific valve events in an LS engine. Well, the valve events would change based on your camshaft, right? Yeah, I thought an 88 millimeter would do that as a single. Somebody sent me a message about a GTX 55 or something like that. That was supposed to be this new low dollar, really high horsepower turbo. He wanted to have me try it, but I just didn't have a motor that I could run it on. I thought that maybe he said it was 2,000 horsepower with a turbo. I will come up from San Diego and help you put the RB in the Z. I just want to put the RB on the engine dyno right now and run it. David, I kind of want to know, his comment is, Richard, if I was a rich man, I would send you a bunch of stuff to test. I want to know if Rhodes lifters take away high RPM power like some folks say. So do they add low speed power and take away high RPM power? I think that they wouldn't do that, but I'd like to test them because I have never run those in the many years that I've been testing stuff. Why would you want to put why would anybody want to put a diesel head on a gas engine that already has a really good cylinder head, and you're going to put a terrible cylinder head on it? Jarvis, you have a TSP 228 cam, ported heads, 102 millimeter throttle body. So now I've already forgot the rest of the stuff that you were asking about because I'm just trying to answer the questions. And what size motor was that? If you're interested in the different valve events from the camshafts, you should talk to the cam manufacturers. Most of them on a cam card have all the valve events that you can look at them. Are 320cc heads good flow for a hydraulic roller 468 Sniper EFI big block? I don't know what 320cc heads they are. I don't know what they flow. You can have a set of 320cc heads that flow terrible. I don't know what those are. An LM7 with a 228 cam, did it have ported heads or anything on it? You need to, if you can, tell me what, it's an LM7, it's a 228 cam, tell me what heads and intake it has. Does it have long tube headers? And I can tell you what kind of power it will make. And then we can back calculate what it will make at the tire roughly. I'm thinking you're going to be on that LM7 question. With a 228 cam. I'm thinking you're going to be in the 350 range at the tire, 360. Will you test the Truck Norris cam on boost soon? I don't have that planned, but it'll just elevates what's there. If you look at the power curve will be exactly the same. It will just, as long as you have the same amount of boost everywhere, it's just going to be elevated. It's just going to be multiplied by what's there. What do you think about the Johnson short travel LS hydraulic lifter versus just going solid lifter on an LS? I don't ever run solid lifters on anything, so I would rather go short travel stuff. But I don't build racing motors so that run at 8,000 or 9,000 RPM. Assuming you don't need to do any sophisticated tuning of any kind, how long does it take to get an engine set up on the dyno? If it's a small block Chevy, it can go up and be running in like, I don't know, 45 minutes or something. Have you made any videos with stock headers versus aftermarket on a 6060 truck engine? Yes, lots of them. As a matter of fact, I ran all of the Brian, or three, I think, of the Brian Tooley truck cams with stock exhaust manifolds on all of them, and then ran all of the truck cams with headers. So you have comparisons, not just of header versus stock exhaust manifolds, but you have that on 4 different camshafts, the stock one and then stage 1 through 3 on all of them. I've run a lot of stock exhaust manifold versus headers on lots of combinations, and there's definitely power to be had there. It's 6.2 liter Ford. Show me the aftermarket heads show me the listing of all the aftermarket heads for the 6.2 liter. Who is doing a someone was doing a photo to put above their fireplace, and I can't find it now. I thought that was kind of funny. LS2 408 PRC 220 1900 TVS. Will it make good power? Yes, if you have. I'm hoping you have some kind of camshaft in it, and then the answer is yes. The limitation is going to be the 1900 TVS on that combination. I have a Trailblazer SS. Just did a Huron turbo kit billet wheel S475. What would be good efficient injectors? Hoping for 700 all-wheel drive. Not 80s if you're not going to run E85. If you're going to run E85, then I would go with something bigger than that, thousands or 1500s or something, 120s, something like that. Truck Norris cam with 706 heads and 456 gearing. Yes, that would be fine. I already found an artist. I really don't think you should go that direction. You should do one of Salma Hayek. That would be good. All in favor of the Ford Boss 6.2 liter. Have you ever dynoed a GM Marine 450 horse 502 and tried making big power with heads, cam, and dyno numbers, drag race applications? The only Marine engines I remember running is we ran a Mercruiser like 335 or 385 or something like that, but it was a 454 though, it's not a 502. You get me on my good side. I don't know which one that would be. Either one of them are very good. In your opinion, would a VVT cam make better numbers than a performance cam or a dedicated truck cam on an L92? Better where? Where are you talking about? Better at 2000? The BTR Stage 4 LSA LS9 cam has a wide LSA, but when I need to read this here. When stroking the motor, it picks up torque as well, and that's what he designed it for. The stroking the motor picks up the torque, right? Not the wide LSA, because those things would be different. I want to see a budget Mercury Marine 1450. Oh, I love these budget builds, Dan. That's awesome. I want to see a test with fuel cooling. I agree. I definitely am going to do that. What about dropping dry ice in the fuel cell? We won't do that, but I can find a way to cool the fuel before it goes into the motor. I know how to find the specs of a cam, but I'm more interested in how the timing of opening and closing affects power, like how much of an effect does closing the intake 5 degrees later make? That's a lot of development time on the dyno to find out all that stuff. Especially if you just want to isolate one valve event, that's a lot of cam swapping. But seriously, on Brule, Freiberger's ported head with boost test, why didn't they bump up the boost so that it was the same on both? They didn't talk to me about that test, and I'm actually not even familiar with it. I haven't seen the results of it, so I don't know. Jarvis, F-body, LM7 cam, LM7 swap, head cam, 228. So LSA back with a 4L80 stock V6 rear end. That's going to be interesting. So it has a stock head and cams on it. I mean, stock head and intake manifold on it. So yeah, I'm still thinking it's going to be now Yeah, low 300s at the tire. Let's say 328 at the tire. Can you do an eBay parts build? I've run lots of eBay parts. Can I get away with a 3-inch exhaust on an 88mm turbo? No, you should be. It's an 88mm turbo is more than likely going to have a 4.5 or a 5-inch exhaust. Jeff, I didn't make that up. It was a description that BTR gave. But yeah, but what does Brian know about camshafts? Little shot there for Brian, for my boy. Cheap eBay aluminum 102mm throttle body and intake. I've run the eBay intake manifold. That's the sniper intake. As a matter of fact, I've run multiple versions of that, 4 different versions of that I know of. It's not a good intake and has nothing to do with where it came from. It's just the design of the intake. When going to West Tech dyno from the CAD company dyno, your Cadillac lost some torque. Is there any reason for the difference other than the dynos for the difference? There probably is. I need to look at it. 700 NA from a 6-liter. That's possible, but it'd be a really high RPM race motor. Okay, 2 more minutes. My 91 Z28 is getting tuned as we speak. Texas Speed. I don't know what Texas Speed cam you have. You have long tubes, a 799 ported and polished. I don't know how well they're ported and polished. Does it say what intake manifold you have on there? No, so I don't know. Is it true? That's a good one. Is it true that both you and Keanu Reeves are time traveling wizards who don't age? That would be awesome. Even just to be mentioned in the same like sentence with Keanu, the guy, I know I've never met him, but obviously everything that I've seen is, I know he's awesome. And he's like a real guy, and he's a car collector, bike collector. He's a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, so he's like the real deal. Do you prefer pure meth injection or water meth? I don't think I've ever tried pure meth injection running that alone. I think I've only ever tried water meth with the different kits. No updates on the 2.2 head porting. If I have any updates on anything, I'll definitely will talk about them. How many hot rods have you had? I had a few. I talk about them a lot when I on the other channel. I mean, on the other videos. Big Block Chevy. Okay, this will be the last one. Big Block Chevy, RPM, Air Gap, Victor, or Wyand Track Warrior with nitrous. The nitrous doesn't care what kind of intake manifold you run. You need to look at the NA power output, what effect the intake manifold is going to have on your combination for the NA power, and then the nitrous just adds to that. It doesn't work better with a single plane. It doesn't work better with a dual plane. It works the same with all of them. If you put 100 horsepower with a nitrous on it, it should add about 100 horsepower. Thank you guys all for showing up. I thank you guys all for supporting the channel. Hope you guys have taken a look at the video that I have up. The next one I'm going to do, I think, is either the LS4 intake test, which was not good, or I might do another comparison one. I'm looking at some turbo comparison stuff, and everybody likes turbo stuff, so that's awesome. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.